Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Darling, put my pants into the washing machine, please. Olympia shouted to his wife as he returned home. Albertina was sorting through a basket of dirty laundry when she discovered a trace of red lipstick on her husband's shirt. Clearly, it was not hers. The woman had already heard rumors that her husband was unfaithful, and his frequent late nights at work were not always due to meetings. But this mark confirmed her suspicions. It wasn't surprising. Olympia was a wealthy farmer, cultivating fields of wheat, rye, and corn. Every year, he harvested a rich crop, multiplying his wealth. Additionally, he was in good shape for his age. He was 45 years old, no longer young but not yet old. The farmer took care of himself, worked out at the gym, and ate well, so he was in excellent shape. However, it hadn't always been this way. They met when they were both young, both students doing their internships at a children's camp. Albertina was a strict and diligent counselor, while Olympia had a volleyball workshop. Albertina had a reputation for being an exemplary student, strict and hardworking. Olympia was known as a charming guy, though not particularly disciplined. Nevertheless, laziness was not one of his traits. The charming, curly-haired guy captivated Albertina, and they began to date. Their relationship continued even after the camp session ended. Olympia, who didn't lack female attention, focused on Albertina and decided to marry her. He proposed just a couple of months later. The ring was modest, the young athlete didn't have much money then. However, Albertina didn't rush to say yes. She loved her school friend Isaac, and it still lingered in her heart. She had liked him since high school, and they had a short romance, but after graduation, they went to different cities for further studies. Albertina enrolled in a pedagogical college in her hometown, while Isaac went to study medicine in a neighboring city. Long-distance relationships didn't work out for them, and the engaged couple decided to part ways. Soon after, Albertina learned that Isaac had found a new girlfriend among his fellow students. It hurt her, and she didn't date anyone until she met Olympia. It was impossible to resist his charm, yet deep down, she hoped that Isaac would come to his senses and come back for her. But that never happened. Soon after, she found out that her high school love had married, and the couple was expecting a child. In defiance of Isaac, Albertina accepted Olympia's proposal, and the young couple got married in the winter. They didn't delay having a child either. Since Isaac has become a father, I'll become a mother too. Albertina thought bitterly. In spring, she became pregnant, and by the new year, she had given birth to a boy named Diego. As the little one was growing, so were the demands of the young family. The country was going through a tough time, and they had to make ends meet. Olympia, as the head of the family, bravely took on the responsibility for his wife and young son. Realizing that he wouldn't earn much as a volleyball coach, he decided to venture into business. Initially, he started selling cat shampoos, but sales were poor. Then he switched to cigarettes, but that didn't go well either. Olympia was on the brink of despair when someone suggested he consider farming. Farming? Are you serious? Do I look like an agronomist? He exclaimed in surprise to his friend. Come on, Olympia. This is a gold mine. You have savings, right? Buy a couple of plots and sow them with oats. You'll see, it will more than pay off, his friend replied. And he was right. Olympia trusted his friend and, indeed, with great skepticism, bought several hectares. In the end, he did become a farmer. That year turned out to be bountiful, and Olympia immediately recouped all expenses, making a decent profit. Realizing that his friend was right, Olympia bought more plots, opened his own farm, hired good agronomists and tractor drivers, and things took off. Over time, his enterprise began to generate millions, and the family encountered immense wealth. Albertina couldn't believe her luck. She came from a simple family of teachers who had never lived lavishly, so at first, she didn't know what to do with such money. Olympia, why do we need so much? She sincerely wondered. Albertina. Come on, we earned it, honestly. So don't be shy, let's live well. We'll buy a big house, gold and diamonds for you, a fancy SUV for me, and Diego will go to the best school. Isn't it wonderful? Maybe we could donate a bit to charity? Albertina asked timidly. All right. We'll allocate some for charity too. Who do you want to support, homeless animals, the elderly, or orphans? Olympia condescendingly asked. Let's help sick children and rebuild the village church, okay? The woman suggested. Fine. Just don't be sad, the farmer replied, hugging his wife tightly. Indeed, the good life took over the family. They started traveling to overseas resorts and dressing well, and their diet started including delicacies. A spacious country house replaced their cramped apartment. Olympio, as promised, showered his wife with expensive gifts, jewelry, clothing, and cosmetics. The family acquired several cars, and eventually, Albertina also learned to drive. Her husband gifted her a Mercedes. However, she didn't like driving it to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. The farmer, as promised, allocated money for charity. Albertina even established her own foundation to help orphan children and named it Crystal Angels. She purchased everything necessary for the orphanage, appliances, furniture, groceries, and brought in psychologists and extracurricular educators, regularly visiting and spending time with the children. They loved their benefactor, hugging her and expressing endless gratitude. Albertina tried to bring her husband to the orphanage as well. One day, he succumbed to her persuasion and came, but he couldn't hide his disgust. Don't invite me there again, he told his wife at home. But these are just ordinary children. Just like our son or his classmates. She argued. Yes, of course, Olympia replied, but it was evident he said it just to finally get his wife off his back. Albertina sighed bitterly but didn't pursue the conversation further. It was enough that her husband agreed to support it financially. She didn't work anywhere herself. She wouldn't mind taking a job in her field, teaching lessons. Still, her husband strongly objected. He wanted his wife to manage the household, not spend nerves on other people's children, and focus on their own. Moreover, Olympia was a jealous man, and even though schools mostly employed women, there was still a risk of encountering some fit PE teacher there. That's what the man thought, so Albertina found herself doing charity work at the Children's Foundation. But this was not her only project. Olympia, as promised, also allocated funds to rebuild the old village church. Albertina remembered going there with her grandmother in her childhood. The place was important to her. They engaged the best architects, craftsmen, and icon painters for the project. True, the restoration process was slow and the work meticulous, but Albertina was in no hurry. She understood that she was involved in an important undertaking that didn't tolerate haste. Life went on in its usual course. Over time, Albertina got used to being the wife of a wealthy man and to the envy directed at her. Even though she conducted herself with the utmost modesty, she tried to wear expensive jewelry as rarely as possible. She put on diamond earrings and sapphire rings only occasionally to indulge her husband's vanity. Olympia, in turn, genuinely enjoyed his millionaire status and shamelessly flaunted it. Their son, Diego, literally grew up with a silver spoon in his mouth. Despite his mother's objections, his father pampered him. You'll spoil the boy, Olympia. Don't you understand? You grew up in a simple family, you know the value of money. Much of your success is thanks to that. Then you achieved everything through hard work, without any connections. And what about Diego? If something happens to you, how will he cope? He's already used to having everything without much effort. You can't do this, you have to teach the boy to work. She scolded her husband. Albertina, come on, what are you talking about? Let the boy enjoy a beautiful life, he'll catch up on everything, you'll see. The farmer dismissed his wife's arguments. All Albertina could do was sigh and continue to observe how Diego grew up as a typical representative of the golden youth. After high school, he declared that he wanted to study in Europe. Why do you need that, son? His mother lamented. You don't even speak the foreign language properly. Stay here, in your homeland. Study to be an agronomist, help your father, and make it a family business. I don't want to get my hands dirty in the black soil. The son proudly declared in response. Dad has already decided everything, and I'm going to study in Italy. The climate is good there, and the food is delicious. I'll become a financial analyst and get a job at some local bank. And I won't come back here anymore. After these words, Albertina cried, choosing not to argue, and silently went to her room. Olympio indeed paid for their son's education, and Diego left to study abroad right after high school. As promised, he rarely visited home. Albertina bitterly acknowledged that there were no close and trusting relationships with her son. Neither of them ever felt a special connection with each other, and over time, they gradually became more distant. At night, Albertina was crying, and her husband was trying to console her. Come on, Albertina. Enough, he said to his wife, stroking her head. When Diego was a child, he was so kind and affectionate. He always brought home stray kittens, feeling sorry for everyone. Remember? She said through tears. Of course, I remember those flea-infested scoundrels. I spent all the shampoos I was selling at that time. Olympio said with a smile. And where did it all go in the end? You spoiled him. I told you that you shouldn't pamper him like that. Albertina persisted. Enough. Olympio began to get angry. He grew up as a normal modern guy, in line with his times. Would it be better if we raised him as a slobbery and weakling? He knows how to stand up for himself. Albertina continued to sob silently. Years passed, and the woman felt an increasingly overwhelming loneliness. The golden cage brought less and less pleasure, even working in the foundation and helping children no longer brought her the same joy. However, the woman diligently purchased everything necessary for the orphanage and organized charitable balls. They continued to build church, and Albertina sometimes visited it to pray. Olympio increasingly disappeared at work, becoming more arrogant and haughty. The woman knew that her husband had resorted to dishonest business practices, which was a departure from his previous integrity. It frightened and upset Albertina, but she knew she couldn't do anything about it because her husband wouldn't listen to her. Don't stick your nose into my business, Olympio rebuked his wife once when she tried to express her opinion about dealing with competitors. She fell silent and didn't try to bring up the topic again. More often, Olympio's friends, similar wealthy individuals who enjoyed indulging themselves, gathered at their house. Sometimes they went on hunting trips together, and this brought Albertina particular pain because she couldn't stand when innocent animals were killed. When her husband brought the dead rabbit or fox to the yard, she tried to hide as quickly as possible to avoid seeing the slain animals. Material possessions no longer brought joy to the housewife. Neither visits to the cosmetologist, beauty salon treatments, nor delicious food brought her happiness. Meanwhile, she remembered that many women envied her and dreamed of having a husband with whom they wouldn't know sorrow. However, over the years of marriage, Olympio had not given Albertina the slightest reason for jealousy. The woman knew that he truly loved her, recalling how he cared for her in their youth, the way he looked at her, and the tender words he whispered in her ear. But even such touching feelings had an expiration date. Soon after Diego's departure to Italy, Albertina began to suspect her husband of infidelity. He started to stay at work more often. While it was true that he used to disappear on the farm for days and nights, it only happened in the summer, during the harvest season. In the fall and winter, the farmer had a dead season, and he would stay at home or travel. However, recently, Olympio began to claim that he had a lot of work, regardless of the season. Urgent matters arose in November, January, and March. At first, Albertina blindly believed her husband, but doubts crept into her heart. Additionally, she started to notice sideways glances at herself. Not just sideways, but full of sympathy and regret. In her surroundings, there were not only people who envied her, but also those who sincerely admired her generosity and compassion. The woman realized that they didn't tell her the truth to avoid hurting her. She decided to have an open conversation, choosing her assistant from the foundation, Blanca, and, incidentally, the wife of the chief agronomist. During the sorting of items for the orphanage residents, Albertina waited for a moment when she was alone with her friend to directly ask the question that troubled her. "Blanca, don't pity me, tell me the truth. Is Olympio cheating on me?" Albertina asked directly. Blanca hesitated and initially tried to evade the question. "Albertina, how would I know? They are all out there in the fields, and I'm here in the city all the time. Blanca, please. I can see that you know something. Tell me everything as it is, please," Albertina firmly requested. "Okay." Valerio mentioned once that Olympio had a few flings on the side, her friend replied, embarrassed. She hurriedly added, "But there's nothing serious there, don't worry. Men are all the same, you know. They are all cheaters." "Not everyone. Valerio is not like that. You know that yourself," Albertina stated. "Well, maybe not everyone, but a lot of them," Blanca agreed. "And those girls there were somewhat ambiguous. It's not like he has a serious affair on the side. Just occasional dates with no commitments, no permanent mistress." "I thought so." "Thank you, Blanca. It's much worse to live in ignorance," Albertina said. "I will definitely talk to Valerio and ask him to hint to Olympio to stop this affair," the woman promised, hopefully. "Okay, thank you." Albertina concluded the conversation, packed the last few things, and left the orphanage. That same evening, on her way home, she burst into tears. She now had a personal driver because, once while driving, she had been in an accident and had since been afraid to drive. The driver's name was Consuelo, and he was only 10 years younger than his employer. He couldn't ask Albertina directly what had happened, although his heart ached when he was looking at his unhappy employer. He respected her a lot and highly appreciated her philanthropic activities. However, Consuelo understood everything, from just one phrase that accidentally slipped from his employer's lips. "But I loved him so much." The driver felt a bit ashamed because he knew about Olympio's infidelity and had seen his lover with his own eyes. But he couldn't tell his employer about it. "Here, have a candy," he handed her a candy, wanting to cheer her up somehow. "Oh, thank you, Consuelo," Albertina said and took the sweet, wiping away tears like a girl. "I haven't had these in a long time. It's like a greeting from my youth." "Well, I'm glad you liked it," the driver smiled and took the employer home. On the way, they didn't exchange a word, and when they had already stopped near the gates, Consuelo suggested, "I can wait here, and you can cry in the car if it makes you feel better," he offered. "Thank you, Consuelo, but it's time for you to go home." "Your family is probably waiting for you," Albertina replied. "I don't have a wife or kids," Consuelo stated. "I see. I'm sorry if I cut to the heart," the hostess said. "No, it's okay. Should I go then?" "Don't be sad." "Goodbye," the driver bid farewell, letting the woman out. Albertina went into the house. Olympio was in the living room watching hockey, cheering for his favorite team. The conversation with Consuelo led her to an unexpected thought. What if she had a second child? Although she was no longer in her youth, women her age still give birth. Health-wise, she never complained. She gave birth to one child and could endure and deliver another. Leaving her unfaithful husband wasn't an option because, over the years, she had become accustomed to the life in which she was a self-sufficient housewife, not needing anything. She wasn't sure if she could start a new chapter where she would be completely independent. Besides, in such a case, Olympio would likely stop financing the charitable foundation and halt the church restoration. She had dedicated years to these projects and was not ready to give them up. Yes, she had grown accustomed to Olympio. With all his pros and cons, romance and passion in their relationship had long faded, but they had grown close and become strangers to each other. In general, divorce was not even considered by Albertina. She had to find other solutions. And the first idea that came to mind was having a child. Decision made, "I'll have a baby," she declared to herself, looking at her reflection in the mirror. That evening, she wore the most tempting nightgown in her wardrobe and arranged a passionate night for her husband. He was surprised, and he even said he wouldn't recognize his wife. "Oh, you thought I was done for? There's still life in the old girl." Albertina winked mischievously at her husband, adjusting the bedsheet. After that, the waiting period began. After a month, she bought a pregnancy test, but it showed a negative result. Albertina decided that it must have been wrong and, after the first day of delay, rushed to a gynecologist. But the doctor didn't justify her expectations, stating that she wasn't pregnant. "You do have a chance, but you should take care of your health. I recommend going to the reproductive health clinic that recently opened in our area. The prices there are not the lowest, but, judging by everything, you have no problems with that, right?" The doctor advised. "Yes. Money is not a problem," Albertina replied. "Thank you, doctor. I will definitely go there. Please, good luck to you, and remember, fortune favors the persistent." Her gynecologist encouraged her. Albertina was determined, and the very next day, she headed to that clinic. However, she soon discovered that getting an appointment there wasn't that simple. One needed to book in advance. Albertina was even willing to bribe to expedite the process, almost for the first time in her life. But they refused to take the money, explaining that the conditions were the same for everyone. She had no choice, so she agreed on the appointment for a week later. Albertina barely survived those 7 days because the idea of motherhood completely engulfed her. She browsed online marketplaces, looked at baby products, toys, rattles, strollers, and even picked a name for the future baby. She would name a girl, Marta, after her mother, and a boy. Well, for a boy, she would choose the name Isaac in honor of her first, most significant love. A week passed with such dreams, and finally, Albertina headed to the clinic. As she was sitting in line, the administrator approached her. She seemed visibly agitated, and there was a reason for it. "I'm really sorry, but the doctor who was supposed to see you fell ill. She has a fever. Unfortunately, she won't be able to see you today," the clinic employee apologized. "Is it possible to schedule me for tomorrow with another doctor?" Albertina asked hopefully. "I'm sorry, but we're booked a week ahead. I can only schedule you for next Thursday," the administrator explained. "What about today? Can't anyone see me today? Every day counts." Albertina started to worry. "Are you okay if a male doctor examines you?" the clinic employee asked. "I'm over 40. I stopped being embarrassed about such things a long time ago. So, call your doctor and show me which office I should go to," the patient replied. "Wait a moment, please. I'll check and come back to you," the administrator requested and went somewhere. She returned quite quickly with good news for Albertina. "I've sorted everything out. You are incredibly lucky. The head of our clinic will see you. He's a specialist with many years of experience." The administrator smiled. "Follow me." "Great." The patient rejoiced and followed the girl. She led her to an office, opened the door, and let the patient in. "Goodbye, and good luck." The girl wished Albertina and left. The woman entered the room and sat down. Opposite her, a man, apparently her peer, with his back turned, was leaning over, filling out some documents. "One moment, please. I'll be free soon and will examine you," he said with a surprisingly familiar voice. She became slightly nervous, and when the doctor turned to face her, she dropped her bag to the floor in utter amazement. "Isaac?" she asked in astonishment. "Albertina?" the doctor asked with the same level of emotion. A silent pause followed. The woman was the first to regain her composure. "How did you end up here? If I'm not mistaken, after studying at the university, you stayed in the city, where you studied, and built a successful career there," Albertina said. "Yes, that's right. I worked as a gynecologist in one of the clinics for a long time. Later, I decided to open my own clinic. It was challenging at first, but gradually it became easier. The clinic flourished and expanded into a network. Recently, I opened a branch in my hometown, the former classmate explained to the patient. I see. I'm happy for you. But why did you come here yourself? Just a routine check, and I was lucky to get an appointment with you? Albertina asked. Not quite. I decided to return to my hometown. I'll be working here, Isaac replied. Surprised, she asked. Remarkable. Usually, at our age, people don't dare to make changes. Why did you decide on this? 2 years ago, I lost my wife in a tragic car accident. The doctor's eyes darkened. I couldn't come to terms with my loss for a long time. Everything in that city reminded me of her. In the end, I thought about a change of scenery. That's what I needed. And I haven't regretted it. I've been living here for 2 months now, and I feel much better. I'm sorry if I cut to the heart, Albertina said. And the child? You had a child, a son, right? A daughter, Isaac said. I named her Albertina. Albertina was taken aback. The doctor continued. She's already an adult, living in France, and a pianist. She's a person of the arts, explained Isaac, then asked, Are you married? Do you have children? Yes, I'm married. I have a son, but he is also already grown up and currently lives in Italy. Our children have grown up so unnoticed, Albertina replied softly. That's true, Isaac said with a smile. So, why are you here now? You see, Isaac, I want to have a child, the woman replied with special tenderness. But, as I am no longer young, it's not that simple. So, I came to your clinic. People highly recommended it to me. They said I was incredibly lucky to have an appointment with you. But, as you understand, due to our acquaintance, I can't decide to have you examine me. Of course, I understand, Albertina, Isaac replied. Today, all our doctors are busy, so I doubt I can help. But tomorrow, I promise, I'll find a slot for you and allocate our leading specialist. And don't worry about your age, women much older than you gave birth. Besides, no matter what you say, you look young. Upon hearing this, Albertina blushed and thanked the doctor. He handed her his business card and asked for her phone number. I will definitely call you as soon as I confirm the time for your appointment tomorrow. Well, for now, let's say goodbye. It was great to see you, the doctor said. I was very glad too, Albertina replied, and she left the clinic. Isaac didn't deceive her. An hour later, he messaged her to come the next day at 10 in the morning. The woman was fluttering like a butterfly, not only because she managed to get an appointment with the best specialist in the clinic, but also because she met her first love and realized that she still had feelings for him. Meanwhile, Olympia couldn't understand the reason for his wife's change in behavior. He hadn't seen her so radiant in a long time. What's gotten into you, dear? He asked. It's all love, darling, Albertina replied, winking playfully at her husband. He smugly smiled, attributing everything to himself. But the woman knew that it was about someone else. The next day, she visited the clinic. She liked the gynecologist. He reassured the woman and prescribed a short course of treatment, after which, he claimed, her chances of pregnancy would significantly increase. Albertina was pleased, but she was no longer so sure that she wanted a child from Olympia. If only Isaac could be the father. But these were just dreams. She was a mature married woman, and she shouldn't have even thought about such things. She saved Isaac's number on her phone and kept rereading messages from him. There was only information about the doctor's appointment, but even that warmed her soul because it was a message from her beloved man. Her dear Isaac was looking at her in the profile picture. He was just the same as in school. He still had the same kind eyes and a pleasant smile. Only there were more wrinkles, and a few gray hairs had appeared. But she, too, was not a young girl anymore. Meanwhile, Olympia continued to cheat on his wife, and the trace of lipstick on his shirt was evidence of that. Seeing it, Albertina finally decided that she had to meet with Isaac and confess her feelings to him. She wanted to do whatever would happen next. At 40, she had become much more determined than she was at 18, and she liked it very much. However, the woman did not know how to start a conversation with her first love. How do I initiate communication? She couldn't text him directly because she had been thinking about him all these years and couldn't live without him. Albertina decided to be more subtle. She sent Isaac a message thanking him for his help and the consultation with a good doctor. He replied that there was no need for thanks. And the old friends began to chat. As a result, Albertina gathered her courage and invited the man to meet. How about getting together for a cup of coffee and reminiscing about our youth, she texted. Wonderful idea. Isaac instantly replied. I'd gladly spend time with you in some cafe. Just, will your husband let you go? Don't worry about that, he's not the jealous type. In reality, Albertina already didn't care about what Olympia would think. Since he stopped considering her feelings, she was not obliged to do so either. The homemaker had essentially sacrificed her life on the altar of serving her husband. Yes, she lacked nothing, but in the end, she hadn't realized herself either professionally or as a woman. On the weekend, Albertina and Isaac met at a cafe. They chose a quiet, uncrowded place to avoid unnecessary gossip. The woman dressed elegantly but not overly sophisticatedly, so the man wouldn't suspect how important the meeting was to her. Isaac was elegant. He had always stood out for that, even in his youth. Both were clearly nervous, and they couldn't hide it. Initially, the conversation was difficult because they couldn't relax. But then, the old friends began to reminisce about their school years, and everything went smoothly. Remember when Julio pulled your hair so hard that he broke the berry off your hairpin? I hit him on the head with my backpack for that, Isaac said. I remember. Then they even called your father to school. Albertina smiled. Yes, but it wasn't serious. For me, the most important thing was to protect you and defend your honor, the man declared. Word by word, it felt as if the long years of separation had never happened. Albertina and Isaac were comfortable with each other. In the end, the woman gathered her courage and confessed that she still had feelings for him. He responded with reciprocity. I love you too, and I wouldn't mind starting everything anew. Besides, now we live in the same city again. But you're married, and on top of that, you want to have another child, the doctor noted. Yes, you're right, the woman sadly replied. I've completely lost my common sense, and I don't know what to do about it. Isaac hurried to change the subject. He didn't want to destroy someone else's family. Albertina accepted the rules of the game and continued the conversation. However, when they left the cafe, the man adjusted the woman's scarf. It was just an act of care. But it ended with a passionate kiss. Isaac, I understand that this is wrong, but I can't help myself. I need you, Albertina said, almost crying and pressing against her beloved. I also really want to be with you, the doctor replied, holding the woman tighter against his chest. And what are we going to do? Albertina asked. Leave your husband and be mine, Isaac decisively declared. What? I can't do that, the woman was frightened. Then let's test our feelings. If it turns out that this is not just a fleeting impulse that will quickly fade away, we will definitely be together. And you will be mine. If it's just a little intrigue destined to quickly end, this affair will remain just a minor fling that will eventually fade from memory, the man suggested. Yes, you're right, the woman agreed, and she leaned against her lover again. So they became lovers. At first, Albertina found this status humiliating. She was embarrassed by it and constantly thought about ending the relationship with Isaac. But day by day, she became more convinced that he was the one, and the shame gradually dissipated. He turned out to be tender, attentive, and affectionate, just as he was in their youth. That was exactly what the woman lacked in her marriage with her husband. Most often, the lovers met in the small but very cozy apartment of the doctor. Why did you choose such a small place for yourself? With your finances, you could rent or even buy a penthouse. Albertina said in surprise. Why would I need a big house alone? It's meant for a large family, and I have no one left. I have my daughter, but she's far away and visits rarely. Now I have you. But you like it here, don't you? Isaac clarified. True, my dear. Now I understand the meaning of the saying with a loved one, even a hut is a heaven, Albertina replied, recalling their large mansion with her husband, where she had felt lonely in recent years. Meanwhile, the woman continued the treatment prescribed by the gynecologist and regularly went for checkups. After 2 months of taking the medications, the doctor finally told the patient that she could now plan for pregnancy. Most likely, the attempts to get pregnant would be successful, and her body was fully prepared to carry a baby. She shared this news not with Olympia but with Isaac. I'm very happy, my dear. I would really like us to have a baby, he said to his beloved with a bitter smile. And I am too, the woman joyfully added. It seems to me that 2 months is enough time to test our feelings. Remember, we agreed that if love doesn't fade away, you will leave your husband for me? Well, it seems to me that the time has come, Isaac said, squeezing Albertina's hand. You're right, though I'm very scared. I've spent my whole life obeying the will of one person. And now I have to change everything radically. It's difficult, the woman shared her feelings. But it's definitely for the better, Isaac insisted. In the end, Albertina decided that she would talk to Olympia over the weekend, not wanting to distract him after a work week. The decisive moment had come, and the woman knew that the conversation would not be easy. The man was in a good mood. He had recently closed a good deal. Olympia, we need to talk, Albertina said. Can we do it later? I'm in a hurry, the guys are waiting. We're going hunting, her husband replied. The subject is very important, the wife insisted. Oh, don't talk nonsense. What else is important? Do we need to buy new tables for your homeless shelter or order a new icon for the church? Well, okay, I'll allocate money, but don't bother me now. Olympia dismissed his wife. Albertina was infuriated, not in jest. She had always yielded to her husband and did everything according to his instructions, but now it was her time. I'm leaving you, Olympia, the wife declared resolutely. The man lost the ability to speak and then burst into laughter. Don't talk nonsense. Are you offended or something? Enough, let's move on, forget it, the husband said. No, this is not nonsense. I really can't take it anymore, Albertina said. Why is that? Olympia was surprised. It's killing me to endure your numerous affairs and accept your coldness and arrogance, Albertina explained. What nonsense? What are you saying? The husband protested. If you thought I didn't know about your mistresses, you were wrong. I can't live like this anymore, and this is my final decision, Albertina declared. Well, where are you going to go? You won't survive without me. You haven't worked a day in your life. Olympia laughed. I'm leaving for another man. The wife almost shouted out of offense, though initially she hadn't planned to reveal her relationship with Isaac. That's interesting. So, you're accusing me of infidelity, and you're cheating on me yourself? These are double standards. Olympia laughed. It's different. You change women often, and I have only one man, and I truly love him. I met him recently, and as soon as we realized that we couldn't live without each other, we decided to be together without cheating. We'll part ways, and I'll start a new life without lovers, but you can bring your harem here if you want. Albertina replied. So, that's how it is? This is what I get instead of gratitude for a comfortable life? Well, you know what? Pack your things immediately and get out. I won't let you back into this house, and I'll file for divorce myself tomorrow. I won't live with a whore. Olympia yelled and slammed the door. Albertina hastily packed her suitcase and a few bags with her most important belongings, leaving the diamonds in the cottage. She walked out into the street. Isaac was already waiting for her in the car. The woman hugged her lover and burst into tears. Well, my dear, the worst is behind us now. We'll be together, and no one will take us apart, he reassured her. The lovers headed to Isaac's apartment. Now I have motivation to buy a big house, he said, smiling and hugging his wife. And I hope we'll live in it together, you, me, and our child. I hope so too, Albertina replied. She had calmed down by then. But, Isaac, you know what worries me? The charitable foundation. Now Olympia won't sponsor it, which means the kids will be left without support. Don't worry, I'll take care of the expenses. My capital is not as big as Olympia's, but nevertheless, I'm not a poor man. The foundation will continue to exist. I know how important it is for you, Isaac assured her. Thank you. And what about the church? They'll stop rebuilding it too. The woman was worried. Don't worry about that, we'll restore it, and God'll help us. It may not be as fast as we would like, but nevertheless, Isaac replied. Albertina kissed him, and they went to sleep. As promised, Olympio filed for divorce the next day, spreading rumors around the city that his wife, once considered almost saintly, turned out to be a deceitful cheater. Many acquaintances turned away from the woman, but she wasn't afraid. Next to Isaac, she felt such strength that it didn't matter what others said about her. She felt completely protected. As promised, Isaac took on the expenses for the foundation, slightly reducing the amount of payment. Simultaneously, he began building a house, choosing a place near the same church. They expected to end the construction in about a year. The building was planned to be large but spacious. Albertina felt truly happy for the first time in many years, even though her son Diego, upon learning about his parents' divorce, turned away from his mother, stopped answering her calls, and made calls himself. He texted his mother only once, after she failed to reach him on his birthday, and in response, she received a message with just one word, traitor. Don't worry, Albertina, he's still very young and passionate. I'm sure that over the years, he'll calm down and understand. You'll definitely reconcile, Isaac reassured her. Unlike Diego, Isaac's daughter took his relationship with another woman quite calmly and even visited them from time to time. I hope you're right, the woman agreed with him, sobbing. Life gradually returned to normal. The spouses divorced, and Isaac and Albertina filed their documents with the civil registry. They were planning to get married soon to avoid delaying the birth of their child. Olympio knew about this and grew angrier. He wanted to hurt his ex-wife, but he didn't know how. You should get married too. What's the problem? His friend wondered during a hunting trip. You always had plenty of women. Choose the youngest and most shapely one and propose to her. That would be too easy, Olympio replied thoughtfully. Well, then think for yourself, his friend shrugged. And Olympio came up with an idea. Drunk, he decided that he should take an extremely marginal person as a lover to show everyone, especially his ex-wife, that even she was better than this traitorous adulteress. He didn't have to look far for a suitable candidate. A homeless girl named Augusta caught his eye. In the summer, she slept on a bench in the park, but then kind people noticed her and helped her settle into a shelter. Augusta was only 19, growing up without a father, just with her mother. No one knew where her father was. Augusta herself didn't remember him. The girl's mother was a kind but weak woman who worked as a seamstress her whole life and taught her daughter the same trade. Augusta and her mother didn't have their own apartment. They were allocated a room in a worker's dormitory, thanks to caring people, her friends working at the factory. But it wasn't their room. The mother and daughter lived there unofficially. Their lives were modest, yet they rarely quarreled, maintained cleanliness, and helped each other. Augusta strongly believed that she would become wealthy when she grew up and would buy a spacious apartment for herself and her mother, so they wouldn't have to squeeze into a small room. However, life had other plans. A severe form of pneumonia claimed Augusta's mother's life, and she literally died before her eyes. At age 18, the girl became an orphan. Sympathetic friends from the factory arranged for Augusta to continue living in the same room. Moreover, they helped Augusta get a job at the factory so that she could earn some money. So, a challenging, but not the unhappiest, year of the orphan's life passed. However, when Augusta turned 19, the factory started layoffs. She was affected, together with her mother's friends. The friends decided to move to another city where they were offered jobs, but they couldn't take Augusta with them. They had to figure out their own settlement. Shortly after their departure, Augusta left the dormitory, and there was no one to take care of her. Thus, Augusta found herself on the streets, without a home or job, entirely alone. She inherited her mother's shy nature and didn't know how to fight for herself. So, she resigned herself to her fate and started wandering. Fortunately, it was summer. The girl roamed through parks and squares, washed in public toilets as best she could, and survived on small savings and the material assistance provided by her former colleagues from the factory. She didn't want to be a vagabond, it was beneath human dignity, but she saw no solution to her problem. The situation seemed hopeless until she met Albertina. The woman noticed the exhausted girl in the park and immediately understood that she needed help. She approached her, learned about everything, and offered to settle her in a women's shelter. You'll live there for a while, learn a simple profession, and when you're able to earn a living on your own, you can leave. Okay? Albertina asked. Okay, Augusta replied and fell to her benefactor's feet. Well, you'll be fine. Get up. Everything will work out, Albertina said with tears in her eyes. In the shelter, Augusta felt warm and ate well, and her clothes weren't dirty. It was only there that the woman noticed how beautiful the girl was. She was tall and graceful, like a ballerina, with long golden hair and huge blue eyes framed by thick black lashes. Even in the simplest clothes provided by volunteers, she could outshine any model. Olympio noticed this too when, at his wife's insistence, he brought missing medications and personal hygiene products to the shelter. "What's this ballerina doing here?" he asked his wife. Fate doesn't choose whom to burden, the beautiful or not. This girl has had very bad luck. But now she's under supervision, so everything will be fine, Albertina explained. At that time, she didn't notice how lustfully her husband looked at Augusta. However, Olympio indeed started thinking of having a romantic affair with a ward of the foundation. Yet he quickly dismissed these thoughts. After all, they were beneath his dignity. However, after his divorce from his wife, he remembered the blue-eyed ballerina and decided she was the perfect candidate for romantic involvement. This way, he could exact revenge on his ex-wife. Moreover, everyone would know about this affair so that Albertina could feel the full depth of her downfall. Olympio decided to find the girl and went to the nearby shelter. He hoped that Augusta was still there, and he was right. The compassionate volunteer, Eusebia, met him at the entrance. "Olympio, very pleased to see you." She greeted him. "Why are you alone, without your wife?" The man was surprised that the shelter was unaware of their divorce, but he quickly realized that this worked to his advantage. They would ask him fewer questions. "She's away," he lied succinctly, avoiding elaborating on the topic. "I see. Why did you come here? Did you bring something at her request?" the volunteer asked. At this point, Olympio realized he was in a bind. He had come empty-handed and without a cover story. He had to improvise. "No, I came to ask about your needs. To buy everything and bring it later," he claimed. "You're a saint," Eusebia exclaimed. "Thanks to your wife's efforts, we have everything we need. The only issue is that the shelter is overcrowded. There's no room for new girls. We need to free up space and resettle those who have already recovered and adapted. But there's nowhere to move them. Can you help with that?" Bingo! Olympio couldn't hide his joy. The opportunity to take Augusta into his own hands presented itself. "Of course, let's do that. I'll help you. I'll rent an apartment for one of your wards. I remember that a few months ago, Albertina brought a homeless orphan girl to you. I think her name is Augusta. Fate treated her bitterly. Is she still here?" "Yes," the volunteer joyfully replied. "And she's ready to live independently. She completed sewing courses and can now earn a living, just like her mother did before." "Great. I'll take her, then," Olympio declared. Eusebia escorted him to the room where Augusta lived and announced that the girl needed to go with Olympio. Do you remember this man, my dear? He's Albertina's husband, the woman who saved you. And now, this wonderful family will save you once again. They'll provide you with temporary accommodation until you can start earning a living on your own. Augusta beamed and thanked Olympio. During her time at the shelter, she had indeed regained her strength and looked fresher, well-rested, and even more beautiful. The man ensured that he made the right choice. Indeed, he took the girl to an apartment, not a rented one, but his own. The farmer had secretly bought it without his wife's knowledge and used it for his extramarital affairs. The place was small but located right in the city center, equipped with the latest technology. And so, will I be living here now? Augusta exclaimed in surprise. Yes, the man answered self-satisfactorily. Thank you. I don't even know what I can do for you, the young seamstress cried. We'll settle the score. He winked at her and left. I'll drop by in a few days. The man decided to give Augusta some time to adapt before making his move. Augusta was gradually settling in and was ready to start looking for work, but Olympio stopped her. Don't rush with that. Take your time to recover. You've had such a tough life, he sympathized with her during his visits. Augusta melted and nodded in agreement. The only thing bothering her was why her benefactor, Albertina, hadn't visited. We got divorced, Olympio pretended to be sad. She turned out to be a deceitful and unfaithful wife. She broke my heart. Hearing this, the girl fearfully covered her mouth with her hands. It's so sad. I never could have imagined she was capable of such a thing. She seemed so kind. Augusta exclaimed. Appearances are deceptive. You're still too young, but as you age, you'll realize that, the man replied. Do you feel very sad, I suppose? The girl asked. I do, Olympio, even more convincingly, declared with a hint of sorrow. He realized that he had found the perfect way to the trusting and kind girl's heart by invoking her pity. Now all that remained was to persuade her to show him affection and make her feel better. It wasn't difficult. Augusta had long been without love and affection and was in dire need of those feelings. Moreover, she had never experienced such strong, masculine support. Therefore, Olympio easily won her heart and made her his lover. The young seamstress was happier than ever before in her life. The man was tender, caring, gave her gifts, and allowed her not to work. However, the young seamstress didn't suspect that her benefactor was doing all this primarily for himself, to satisfy his ego and to get back at his ex-wife. Olympio began to take the girl out to restaurants and social gatherings. He had previously given his lover a makeover, took her to a beauty salon, and bought her beautiful clothes and shoes. Everyone who saw the girl admired her beauty. And when they found out that Augusta was an orphan whom the man graciously took under his wing, they praised his kindness and generosity. They pitied him in light of his wife's deceit, who seemed like an angel but turned out to be a terrible person. Olympio was satisfied, but he still had to wait for Albertina's reaction. However, upon learning about her ex-husband's new relationship, she just smiled sadly. I feel sorry for the girl, she said to Isaac. She is truly very nice, but unlucky in life. Why do you say that? He didn't force her to sleep with him, did he? Her lover asked in surprise. No, of course, but he deceived her, and that's even worse. You'll see, he'll play around and then leave her. And the girl's heart, already broken, might shatter into pieces, she explained. Okay, my dear, that's no longer our concern. We have enough of our own worries. We need to prepare for a trip to the civil registry and finally decide which restaurant we'll celebrate our wedding in, Isaac said, kissing his future wife. She smiled in response, diverting her thoughts from her ex-husband. Meanwhile, he continued his affair with Augusta. The girl turned out to be quite similar to Albertina in many ways, kind and submissive. On one hand, he liked it, the type was familiar and attractive. On the other hand, doubts tormented him internally about whether his new passion would treat him the same way as his wife did. Life had shown that hidden dangers lurked in still waters. He was restless in his doubts and couldn't find peace. And when he learned from mutual acquaintances that Albertina was completely indifferent to his affair with the homeless girl, he lost his emotional balance. His plan failed. He couldn't upset his ex-wife. So, was all this in vain? He had invested so much effort into the girl, transforming her from a caterpillar into a butterfly. What did he care about people around him appreciating this move when Albertina remained indifferent? The farmer became seriously angered, and in this state, caring and affection for Augusta seemed unnecessary and brought no joy. Without much thought, Olympio decided to end the relationship with this naive but completely uninteresting girl. In this case, he thought it was better to be with hardened shrews than with someone who looked so much like the main woman in his life, whom he had become weary of. The man decided not to be diplomatic and to announce everything to Augusta directly. He tried to choose careful expressions to avoid hurting the girl too much, but whatever you say, everything will resonate with pain. After listening to her chosen one, the girl did indeed burst into bitter tears. "Well, it'll be fine, Augusta." Olympio awkwardly comforted her, silently scolding himself for getting involved in this story. "You're still so young, you'll definitely find your love. You've been taught the sewing craft, and I'll help you find a place in some atelier. Everything will be fine." "No, it won't. It will never be. I am not meant for a happy life. My fate is suffering," the girl declared. "But why do you say that?" the man asked, growing irritated. He couldn't stand women's tears. "Because I'm pregnant," Augusta loudly exclaimed, not resembling herself in that moment. Olympio was shocked. "It can't be, we were careful." The farmer couldn't believe his ears. "Well, not careful enough," the girl sobbed. "Yeah, messed up," the man said under his breath. He sat on the couch, vigorously rubbing his temples for a couple of minutes, then joyfully shouted, "Why dwell on it? You need to have an abortion. You're young and healthy. You still have your whole life ahead. Later, you can have a child with your legal husband. Why become a single mother? Don't worry about money, I'll cover everything," Olympio was trying to convince Augusta. Augusta stopped crying and soon agreed to this option. The man breathed a sigh of relief. "You're a smart girl. I'll arrange everything with the hospital and come pick you up tomorrow," the farmer said, leaving the apartment, cursing everything and everyone. And, most importantly, his ex-wife. He believed that Albertina had become the source of all his troubles. The next day, he did take the ballerina to the doctor. At first, in the car, he tried to lighten the mood and awkwardly joke, but Augusta didn't react to him. She sat silently, looking out the window with her arms crossed. Olympio fell silent, and in complete silence, they reached the hospital. The girl entered the room, where she had to undergo an unpleasant procedure, and the man stayed to wait in the corridor. However, after a few minutes, Augusta rushed out of there, crying, I can't do this. I'd rather be a single mother than a damn creature." She shouted so loudly that patients and medical staff turned their heads. "What are you so upset about? Let's talk quieter." Olympio tried to calm her, leading her out of the hospital. They got into the car, and the man, changing his tone from falsely friendly to firm, said, "So be it. I won't raise this child. We never discussed it. Yes, and maybe you brought it on yourself. I wasn't holding the candle. But you're lucky, I'm a kind person. Here's 300,000, for now, it'll be enough. You'll figure it out later. You're not a little girl anymore, it's time to learn to take responsibility for your actions," Olympio categorically stated, handing Augusta a stack of bills. "I'll transfer the remaining amount to your card. Goodbye for now, and all the best to you." Augusta had no choice but to get out of the car and be alone again with her fate. Perhaps she wouldn't mind returning to the streets because she didn't know how to go on. But now, a new life was growing inside her body, and she couldn't show weakness. And, anyway, now she had at least some money. Olympio did indeed transfer the remaining amount to her almost immediately, even a bit more. Augusta went to an online classifieds website and rented the first affordable apartment she found, as it was very cute. Also, she sought advice from a crisis center, where she had lived for several months. No matter how much volunteer Eusebia tried to find out who the father of the child was, Augusta never gave her an answer. She decided to keep it a secret. After all, knowing this fact wouldn't change the situation. In the end, Eusebia just sighed bitterly, gave her former ward some baby items that are always in stock at such institutions, and promised to arrange a job for Augusta at a sewing studio until the due date. The girl thanked the volunteer and went home to get used to her new status and life. Eusebia didn't deceive her and indeed helped with finding a job. The sewing studio was conveniently located near the apartment the seamstress rented. The team turned out to be good. All the women were supportive of their new colleague and treated her with understanding. Although she didn't earn much, now she had some income. Plus, there was still a financial cushion from Olympia, and her new colleagues brought in things left by their grown-up sons and daughters. Thanks to this, a stroller and a crib appeared in her apartment. Life no longer seemed so bleak. 7 months passed, the girl went on maternity leave and was already preparing to give birth. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. She had an easy pregnancy without any health problems. But then, at a late stage, she suddenly felt unwell. Augusta was admitted to the local perinatal center, and the doctors were very concerned about her condition and couldn't fully understand the reasons for her sudden malaise. "We'll have to involve other colleagues. We can't handle it ourselves," said the doctor who was treating her. She was extremely worried. She was expecting a boy and had already chosen the name Pedro for him. She didn't know why, but she always liked that name. Now, her biggest fear was losing Pedro. "Don't worry. I've invited a colleague from a private clinic. He's a big specialist and will definitely help," the doctor reassured her. "But I don't have extra money," the woman responded bewilderedly. "Don't even think about that. We can't handle your problem on our own, so we'll cover all the expenses," the doctor explained. The long-awaited expert came the next day. It was Isaac. It turned out that he studied with the attending physician, Augusta, on the same course. They maintained a good relationship, so he responded to his friend's request. "So, where is our future mommy lying?" he cheerfully said at the doorway. "Hello," the girl replied shyly, stroking her belly. Isaac froze. The patient turned out to be incredibly similar to his best friend, Pedro, who died of cancer several years ago. He felt a pang in his chest, but he had to gather himself and examine the patient. After the examination and reviewing the results of previously taken tests, Isaac confidently stated, "Everything is clear. You have fetal-placental insufficiency. It can be acute, for example, against the background of placental abruption. This is a very serious complication of pregnancy, but we can handle it. I'll prescribe you good medications, and you'll get better." "Well, and a therapeutic and protective regimen, of course," Isaac said in a reassuring tone, and he smiled at Augusta. "Thank you, doctor," the expectant mother thanked the medic. "But why did this happen to me?" "Probably due to stress. I don't see any other reasons." "Have you had reasons to be stressed?" Isaac asked. "Yes, but that's all in the past," the girl replied succinctly. "Well, that's great. I like your attitude," Isaac said, then turned to the colleague present in the room and added, "I'd like to stay alone with the patient for a couple of minutes. We need to discuss something." The colleague nodded understandingly and left the room. "Augusta. Is that your name?" he asked, addressing the girl. "You remind me of my friend. Can you tell me your dad's name and where he is now? I grew up without a father and never saw him." "I don't know his name," the patient answered, frightened but honestly. "All right. And what's your mom's name, and what was her occupation?" Isaac continued. "Natalia Torres. But she passed away." "And by profession, she was a seamstress," Augusta replied. Isaac grabbed his head. "Well, there you go," he exclaimed. "What do you mean?" the girl asked, pressing against the bed's backrest. Am I about to face another tragedy? No, my dear, quite the opposite. The doctor said joyfully. The main thing is not to worry. It's strictly forbidden for you in your condition. But still, listen to my story. As I said, I had a good friend, Pedro. He was an absolutely amazing person, generous, optimistic, kind, and intelligent, a real movie hero. We met him during our college years. We studied at different universities, but both attended the mountaineering section. We went on hikes together, conquered mountains, and went through a lot. He had the love of his life, and her name was Natalia Torres. They met at the seaside. They had a bright resort romance, and then they parted ways with their hometowns. Pedro was finishing his studies and couldn't join his beloved at that time, and Natalia was also studying to be a seamstress. During the winter holidays, she managed to break away from her beloved. I saw her, so I immediately recognized her features in you. You're very similar. Pedro was so happy next to his chosen one, and she shone next to him. Watching them, I understood that true love exists, no matter what anyone says. But then why didn't they stay together? Augusta wondered. Your grandfather was categorically against it. When he found out that your mom was having a romance with some young guy from another town, he literally locked her up at home. Did you not meet your grandmother? Isaac asked. No, she passed away when my mom was in school, but I did know my grandfather. He was indeed a very strict person, a conservative. But at the same time, he truly loved both my mom and me. He took care of us a lot. He passed away when I entered the second grade. It was a big loss for our family, the girl recounted. I understand. My condolences for your loss, the man replied. But then, it was your grandfather who stood in the way of your parents. I understand he wished the best for his daughter, but I'm not sure it turned out that way. When Natalia came to Pedro, she lied to her father, saying she was going to a friend's place. But he found out everything and went after his daughter, forcefully taking her home. Before leaving, Pedro declared that he would never see Natalia again. It was a devastating blow for my friend. Your mom also cried bitterly when she boarded the train, but her father was impossible to convince, Isaac explained. But how can that be? Why? Augusta was almost crying. That's how it goes. Life is an interesting thing, and each of us has our own idea of happiness. A few months later, Pedro received a letter from Natalia informing him that she was pregnant and expecting a girl, you. However, her father considered his daughter's situation a disgrace to the family, so he decided to take her to a new city. She didn't even know which one. The girl promised to write to her beloved from there. Pedro immediately rushed to the old address of Natalia, believing he would still find her there, but he was too late. Indeed, the father took your mom away, and apparently to the city we're in now. Pedro returned home and waited for a letter from his beloved. He couldn't wait to learn about the birth of his daughter and find out where her little girl was. He was ready to abduct you and your mom, but Natalia never wrote. I don't know why. My friend waited a couple more years but received no lines from his fiancée. In the end, he married a good girl whom he respected but didn't love. They lived together for 10 years but eventually divorced. Pedro never loved his wife and they didn't have children. Until the end of his days, he remembered your mom, spoke about her with adoration, and deeply regretted never seeing you. He was trying to search her on social media, but apparently she didn't have any profiles there. Even on his deathbed, it became his main pain. That's how it goes, Isaac concluded. After Isaac's monologue, Augusta could no longer hide her tears. She was crying and continued to hold onto her stomach. Not long before my grandfather's death, my mom went somewhere for a few days. She said she was going to visit a friend, but I knew she had no friends in other cities, the girl remembered. Perhaps she went to Pedro, but she didn't go straight to him. She found out how his life had turned out. She was very delicate, never wanting to be a burden to anyone and always wanting to please everyone. Maybe she learned that Dad was married and didn't want to intrude on his family, so she just returned home. I remember she came back very sad. Isaac let her release her emotions, but then he took her hand and tried to console her. I understand your feelings. I hope you haven't repeated the fate of your mother, and your little one, whom you carry in your heart, will have a loving and caring father, Isaac said. No, the girl replied. Apparently, it's our family curse to raise children alone. I'm not married, and the father of my daughter left me when he found out about my condition. So, I'm completely alone. It's very sad, and the one who treated you like that is a real scoundrel. Don't despair. The thing is, your father wasn't lucky in love, but he made a fortune in business and became a successful entrepreneur. Pedro was engaged in supplying agricultural machinery very successfully. By the end of his life, he had managed to amass a considerable fortune. He had no close relatives, his parents had passed away, he divorced his wife a long time ago, and they had no children. But until the last days, he didn't lose hope of meeting you, his daughter. His only child. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but he still believed that you would be found. So, he left me, his closest friend, his property, and a part of the business in his will. He also entrusted me with finding you and passing on all this. I did try to search, I even hired a private detective. But all in vain. And now, by chance, we met, and how can you not believe in fate after that? Isaac exclaimed. Augusta stopped crying, she couldn't believe her ears. So, from a poor girl who recently wandered the streets, thinking she was destined for a hungry death, she turned into the heiress of a large estate? It was like a Cinderella story, no less. Aren't you deceiving me? The expectant mother asked, sobbing. Well, of course not. And now you're not alone, you have me. You can consider me your uncle. Perhaps you lack female advice. Don't worry about that, my wife will take care of it. She's very kind and has been involved in charity all her life. Maybe you even know her, Isaac said, mentioning the name Albertina, who was already his wife at the time. At this point, Augusta started crying even harder. Isaac got worried and asked about the reasons. The girl decided to honestly tell him about her affair with Olympia and what he told her about his ex-wife. The doctor hurried to assure his friend's daughter that it was a blatant lie. The main deceiver and cheater in this whole story was Olympia himself. Now I understand it myself, Augusta replied, sobbing. All right, that's enough tears for today. Calm down, take care of yourself, and I'll take care of the paperwork and inheritance in your name. When you leave the maternity ward, you'll be a well-off girl, and there will be no need to return to your apartment. With the money left by your father, I will buy you a place closer to us and Albertina, all right? Isaac said. Augusta nodded contentedly. Isaac kept his word and, just in time for the birth, completed the process of formalizing the transaction. An apartment for Augusta and her daughter was not far from the doctor's home. Albertina understood the girl's story, although she was afraid that the benefactor would resent her. Oh, silly girl. Don't worry, Albertina reassured her. I know Olympia well, and I understand that he simply took advantage of you. I don't hold any grudge against you, it's not your fault. Augusta gave birth to a boy and, as planned, named him Pedro. Now there was one more weighty reason for that. Unfortunately, on the day of discharge, Isaac's car broke down, and Albertina still couldn't bring herself to drive. But the woman knew who to turn to for help. She called Consuelo, the driver who quit and left Olympia shortly after their divorce. The man agreed to help the family and came to the maternity ward. The hospital staff mistook Isaac and Albertina for Augusta's parents and Consuelo for her husband, so they handed the baby over to him. Here you go, Daddy, take the newborn. Consuelo was taken aback but soon took the baby. At that moment, he beamed and didn't deny or say that the child wasn't his. When they went outside, an embarrassed Augusta took her son. Excuse us for this. Thanks for playing along with the driver, she said. Oh, no problem at all. I don't have kids of my own, so it was actually nice, the man smiled. Soon, they all, as a big friendly group, headed to Augusta's new apartment, already prepared for the young mother and her baby. Everyone was smiling, having fun, and believing that life would now be different and bright. And what about Olympio? His life went on its usual course. He conveniently forgot about the abandoned pregnant girl and never bothered to inquire about her well-being. The farmer returned to his carefree lifestyle, hanging out with friends, playing billiards, and enjoying the company of various girls. Deep down, he understood that he was just numbing the emotional void that took over him after Albertina left, but he couldn't stop. If his personal life was bleak, his business flourished. Luck always accompanied him in matters of money. But only for a while. Olympio planned to close a major deal for the supply of agricultural machinery since his old equipment was becoming obsolete. He found the best supplier, offering unique machines at the most favorable prices. Other suppliers had a more meager assortment and asked for exorbitant sums. The man personally went to the neighboring city, where the company's main office was located. He was confident in the success of the enterprise and didn't doubt that he would return home with a signed contract. Imagine his surprise when the company informed him that his proposal was rejected and there would be no equipment deliveries. Why is that? The farmer got angry. I don't know, the deputy director replied. Who does? Olympio persisted. Our main shareholder, it's her decision, the company representative explained. Can I talk to her? The farmer asked. At the moment, she's in another city, ironically, in your hometown. She's the young heiress of the founder of our company. A few months ago, she gave birth to a child and will be baptizing him this weekend. By the way, in the ancient church, the restoration, which you were involved in for some time. The restoration was completed just recently, the organization's representative explained in detail. Understood, thank you for the information, Olympio said, heading for the exit. The refusal in the deal didn't leave him alone. He found no information about this mysterious heiress in public sources, there was no data about it. But he was eager to see her with his own eyes and find out why she refused him. Without this deal, his farm was supposed to suffer losses since he had to buy equipment elsewhere at a much higher cost. On Sunday, he went to the church, a place he hadn't visited since Albertina left. At the sight of the golden domes, he shivered. There were many cars near the church, including Consuelo's familiar foreign car. This surprised Olympio. People were singing hymns in the church, the christening was in full swing. The farmer entered and was dumbfounded. The mother of the baby and, at the same time, the main shareholder of the company turned out to be Augusta. Next to her, holding her hand, was Consuelo. Albertina and Isaac baptized the baby. In confusion, Olympio went outside. At the end of the christening, he approached the group of people coming out of the church, all shining with happiness. And how should I understand all of this? He shouted. Isaac and Consuelo took 2 steps forward, as if trying to shield their beloved women. It's very simple, Olympio, said Albertina. It's karma. His ex-wife told him Augusta's story, and only then did Olympio notice that Albertina was pregnant. The rounded belly was clearly visible. But how is this possible? I am the father of the child. I also have the right to inheritance. The farmer shouted. Not so fast, declared Augusta. The child's father is Consuelo, he is the one listed on Pedro's birth certificate. You can't disown your son and then, as if nothing happened, claim your rights to him. Consuelo embraced Augusta and nodded. Meanwhile, she continued. Once you told me that appearances can be deceiving, and I would soon find out for myself. Back then, I couldn't even imagine that it would happen so quickly. I truly realized it, thanks to you. But it wasn't all in vain. I became much stronger, and now I won't let anyone harm myself, my child, or the people dear to me. Yeah, get lost, all of you, shouted Olympio and walked towards his car, continuing to throw profanities at everyone gathered. However, both Albertina and Isaac, and Augusta and Consuelo, couldn't care less. They were happy and loved, knowing that they could rely on each other at any moment. And that was what mattered most.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.